back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time I'm gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky.
Coming to you from Freehold, New Jersey, it's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, normally powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good evening, everyone. I'm, of course, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you here on this Monday, the 15th day of December, 10 days away from Christmas. For those of you who are celebrating it beginning, I believe, today, happy Hanukkah. For those of you also celebrating Kwanzaa, happy holidays to you as well. And as you can see, if you're watching on Facebook Live or Facebook Watch, whatever we call this streaming format, I am not in the normal studio today, as if you live here on the East Coast, we got a visit from Old Man Winter over the weekend, and thankfully did not have to work yesterday due to that, and was feeling a little bit of the mindset that I want to really travel too much as ice is still starting to melt. But hey, that wasn't going to stop me from ranting with my weekly sports therapeutic session that is this podcast to give some thoughts on everything going on. Because with us being 10 days away from Christmas, there's some fan bases out there that could use some of the Christmas spirit, that could use some Christmas joy in their life, especially in the NFL, with some of the teams that either have been eliminated from playoff contention, are looking toward the draft next year, or are in playoff contention and suffered some potentially back-breaking injuries over the weekend. Rather than have a Scrooge in your life, I'm here to uplift you. I'm here to break it all down. But there's one fan base that, more so than any other right now, could use a little bit of the holiday spirit, could use some uplifting, and that is, of course, the New York Mets. The New York Mets, who must feel like they have a Scrooge in their life, must feel like they've been given one big bag of coal over the last week by the gift that keeps on giving, their general manager, David Sterns, who might be the most hated man in New York sports right now. For a long time, that mantle has been grasped by Yankee general manager Brian Cashman. And while he's not completely off the hook, we still have to wait and see if or what him and the Yankees do this offseason. That kind of takes a back step right now compared to what the Mets have done so far this offseason, which feels like one big giant kick in the balls to their entire fan base. It's one thing when, about 3 weeks ago, they traded away Brandon Nimmo. Yes, they traded him away for a player that is 3 years older than him, that is not as good offensively as him anymore. But at the same time, you looked at Nimmo and you said that that was starting to become a bad contract for the Mets, a guy that was probably better off being a DH for them at this point in his baseball career. Or at least he was edging toward there with some of the injuries that he's had, as well as defensive metrics of his taking a back step in the last year. And you knew that this offseason that the Mets need to change up the core of this team a little bit, but you figured that change of the core was going to be after Nimmo getting rid of Jeff McNeil, who I think most Met fans would drive to the airport right now. What you did not expect is for in a 2-day span them to let both Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso walk out the door, and seemingly without even a threat of stopping them from leaving. And it's hard to balance which one of these is the worst non-move as far as letting two prominent players, probably two guys that I think most would consider amongst their top 5 players on this team, just walk out the door without even making them a true legitimate counteroffer before they ultimately accepted their deals. I mean, in the case of Edwin Diaz, you let him walk away to the last team that anybody would have wanted him to join, and that is our current 2-time reigning, defending World Series champion, Los Angeles Dodgers. All right, the rich just keep on getting richer. They signed Shohei Ohtani a couple of years ago, and that's after adding Betts and Friedman. Then they go out and get Yamamoto. They get Glasnow. They go get Blake Snell last offseason. They're the ultimate winners of the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes, and he turned out to be somewhat useful for them out of the bullpen during the postseason. They add Tanner Scott last year, and still, with winning 2 World Series in a row, that was not good enough for them. As, let's face it, they won that World Series largely on the back of the greatness that is Shohei Ohtani and being able to show all of his wonderful talents in this postseason beyond just pitching and hitting, doing both of those in one postseason for the first time in his career. And a starting rotation that at times you had guys coming out of the bullpen during the NLCS and World Series due to how much their bullpen had struggled during the season. I mean, it got so bad for Tanner Scott that he barely was even seen during this postseason. They were using Sasaki as the closer. They used Yamamoto to close out the game-deciding Game 7 of the World Series. They're using Glasnow and Blake Snell in bullpen spots. Hell, even the now retired Clayton Kershaw was coming out of the bullpen. And now they add what I think you could say is undisputedly the best closer in baseball in Edwin Diaz for 3 years, $69 million. Now, it's a tough pill to swallow signing a relief pitcher for that kind of money, but he's shown to be worth it with what he has done over these last several years, especially rebounding after what was a hideous start to his Mets tenure years back, and then turning into 3 of the last 4 years the best closer in the sport, including this past year where he's an all-star once again, had an ERA mid-1, a whip under 1, struck out almost 100 batters over 66 innings. With how much the Met bullpen struggled, and with some of the guys that have left through free agency, whether it be Helsley or others that they just let walk out the door, you would have figured that this would be something that they would consider to be a must-have. But what happened? I don't think it's the situation with, his brother telling him how much the Dodgers are well run or how great of a coaching staff that they have, great locker room that they have, because his brother Alexis Diaz had been there all of about 5 minutes and didn't finish the season on the Dodgers. He was claimed away and then DFA'd as quick as you could snap your fingers. This is a case of he felt disrespected by this organization. The fact that they did not give him the heads up, that they went out and signed Devin Williams, who, while he was an all-star and a good pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers for many years under Mets general manager David Sterns, was absolute garbage for the New York Yankees last year. You went out and gave him $51 million before telling Edwin Diaz, before locking things down with Diaz and keeping him in the loop, saying, hey, we're looking at bringing this guy in as your setup guy. And when you have a guy that you care that much about, or at least you say you care that much about having on this team, especially with, let's be honest, the crapshoot that the Mets starting rotation is right now, and the fact that there are so many holes to fill in that bullpen, this is a spot you want to make sure of where you say, all right, maybe we have questions of how we get through the first 8 innings, but when we get to that 9th inning and the bell rings, we know the game is over. We're locking things down and emphatically finishing this game. But you let them walk out the door to the Los Angeles Dodgers, a team that not just you, but everyone else is trying to get past in both the NL and in Major League Baseball all together. And having an owner like Steve Cohen was supposed to prevent you from these days. Now, of course, there's a moment or a price range where you get to and you say, oh, this is just stupid money that's irresponsible for us to spend. But you should have upped the ante, given him an extra year, willing to match that $69 million that the Dodgers were giving him. And it's not even like he took a big deferral like previous free agents that have joined the Dodgers. He took a $4.5 million deferral. That's chump change compared to some of the other guys that they have on deferred contracts. It's bad enough that that is what started your Tuesday morning last week. But then for 24 hours later, while you're still trying to overcome this, as either you're sitting there at work, you're driving to work, maybe you're having breakfast, the news breaks that one of the longtime faces of your franchise, a homegrown New York Met, in Pete Alonso, signs a 5-year deal with the Baltimore Orioles. You know, every generation has that player they grow up on and say, that's our guy. The previous generation had David Wright. The generation before that had Mike Piazza. Even though he wasn't a homegrown Met, he was a guy you got via trade from the Dodgers/Marlins. Back in the 80s, it was Darryl Strawberry. And only one of those guys was allowed to finish his career with the New York Mets, that being David Wright, who things were unfortunately cut short due to injury. Pete Alonso is not a perfect player by any means. He's not the greatest athlete in the world. His range at first base is very suspect, and he's probably a guy that in the long term you were going to flip to being a designated hitter. But you look at that Met lineup right now. Outside of Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, who do you look at and you say, we have confidence in them performing? As of right now, you have 2 open spots in the outfield. Jeff McNeil's a guy that you would, like I said earlier, drive to the airport to get rid of. And then there's the question marks of who's playing third base, whether that be Beatty, whether it be Vientos. can Alvarez stay healthy to be your full-time everyday catcher? And there's a lot of question marks in this lineup. You have no true protection behind Juan Soto, and that's what Pete Alonso provided for you last year. He rebounded off of what was a sluggish 2024 season after having to settle for essentially a one-year $30 million deal to return to the Mets, and had one of his better seasons of his career. Now, maybe the mistake here, and probably two mistakes here by Pete. A, passing up on the long-term deal that he was offered by the previous regime back in 2023 when he was presented with a 7-year, $158 million contract. And that ties in with mistake number two, that he bought into what Scott Boras was selling him, trying to convince him that maybe he could get the same kind of contract as Aaron Judge. He was never getting that kind of deal. No first baseman is going to get that deal. And Pete Alonso is not on the same level of player as a legend like Aaron Judge. Great Met, but not that kind of player. But he's still a homegrown guy. He's still someone that you've grown attached to, and still one of your better players, even despite his shortcomings defensively. And even with his lacking in athleticism, he didn't truly embarrass you over at first base. And the Mets have shown to be the ultimate hypocrites here, or at least David Sterns has shown to be the ultimate hypocrite here. The fact that you let Alonso walk out the door, but then on Friday you signed Jorge Polanco to essentially be his replacement, when Jorge Polanco has about as many innings in the major leagues at first base as I do. And that is a grand total of 0. None. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You can't just take anybody and stick them over at first base. It's not as simple as playing catch in the backyard with your dad as a kid. All right? You've got to scoop the ground balls. You've got to be able to make relay throws. You've got to be able to turn the 3-5-3 and 3-6-3 double plays. There is a lot that goes into it besides just simply stepping on the bag and catching the ball. And you take a guy that has been here for a long time, has shown capabilities of playing first base, even though he should probably be a DH moving forward, and replace him with a guy that has nowhere near the power of him. And unlike Alonso, Polanco gets hurt a lot. Pete Alonso has played 162 games each of the last 2 seasons. He's a guy that you have rarely over the course of his career, even with that lacking in athleticism, even the fact that he's not built like an Adonis, he stays healthy. He is actively on the field for you, and you can't guarantee that Polanco is going to be there. These are the kind of days you were supposed to avoid having when it came to having a not just general manager in David Sterns, but an owner in Steve Cohen. Because he waited multiple years to get David Sterns in here as his general manager. He finally gets him in, and you figure, oh, this guy who's been raved about as one of the best general managers in the sport for years was going to take what he did in Milwaukee, translate it over, but now he's got an owner willing to spend money. And what are they doing? Outside of Juan Soto, they're not spending money because he's tried to get cute with how he does the starting rotation. And while that worked in 2024 in getting them to the World Series, that blew up in their faces big time this past season when you barely had Sean Manaea during this year. Clay Holmes, it became a disaster after the first 2 months of the season because it was always a struggle getting him through 5 innings. Frankie Montas was a waste of 2 years, $34 million. And he was essentially brought here to replace Luis Severino, who you let walk out the door without trying to re-sign after having a great year. Kodai Senga got so lit up late in the year that you sent him to the minor leagues, and it put too much pressure on these kids where Nolan McClain looked the part, looked like a guy that could be your future stalwart, your future ace of this rotation. But Sprout had okay success, and Tong looked like a kid that was not ready for the big league moment. So now you're left sitting here saying, we let two very important pieces of our team go, our closer and our cleanup hitter. We sign a guy that has never before played first base in the big leagues. And we've got multiple holes on this team. 2 spots to fill in the outfield. What are you going to do? Bring up both Benj and Williams to play those spots? Benj only played 24 games last year in AAA and hit $170. And Jet Williams played only 34 games in AAA of his 130 last year and hit 209. So it's not like these guys have completely conquered the minor leagues at this point, to the point where you could just slide them in and they're ready to be everyday major leaguers. And then you got the case of the rotation. You really feel confident going into a season where your rotation could be some version of Nolan McClain, Sean Manaea, Clay Holmes, David Peterson, who, while very good, struggled in August last year, Brandon Sprout, and Jonah Tong, who probably should be in the minor leagues, and Kodai Senga is still here, but you guys keep trying to trade him. You've rarely heard the Mets attached to any of the big-time free agent pitchers. You haven't heard their name when it comes to this pitcher coming over from Japan. You haven't heard their name when it comes to the likes of a Michael King, or when Dylan Cease was available, there was no talk of that. Framber Valdez, it seems like he's trying to wait out the Houston Astros. You can't go into next season with this same staff, especially when you say that, oh, we're trying to upgrade things defensively, but you're going to have a guy that has no experience playing first base and could have a lot of question marks around the field, whether it be young kids or whatever position they decide to play Jeff McNeil at. If you're a Met fan today, you have every right to be pissed off at David Sterns, because he is talking out of both sides of his mouth, speaking right out of his ass with some of his thoughts and theories on this. And you thought you had confidence in Steve Cohen to be that ultimate protector, ultimate savior. You figured that with him here, he wouldn't allow you to get bullied around by the Dodgers and lose at Edwin Diaz to them. He wouldn't allow a homegrown favorite and a guy that probably should have been a lifetime Met to walk out the door to the Baltimore Orioles, who have struggled for 2 years to get anyone to take their money. But instead, you're watching these guys walk out the doors. You watch backup plans or potential backup plans sign elsewhere, with Kyle Schwarber re-signing with the Phillies for less money than it took to sign Alonso. Or the Braves signing Robert Suarez, who would have been a fantastic addition to that bullpen, on top of keeping Diaz. Now you don't even have him to set up Devin Williams. And you saw what a mess Devin Williams was in his first year in New York with the Yankees last year. It's starting to feel like maybe Steve Cohen, he cares more so about this casino that he's building next to Citi Field and this whole Mets project with all of the things that they're building around the subway station, more so than he cares about owning this baseball team. And this is the guy that had the nerve to call out the Met fan base last year, had the nerve to say, hey, come out to Citi Field, come support this team, come get behind this team. But instead, he's just talking, but not truly backing that up. It feels like he's trying to save money now off of the Juan Soto situation. After giving him $800 million and now having this casino being built. But 4 years from now, Juan Soto could walk out the door as a free agent. He could opt out if he does not see a winner built around him. So the clock is truly ticking for David Sterns, truly ticking for the fan approval of Steve Cohen. And this coming off a year where the Mets missed the postseason, won 83 games, and it was a struggle just to get that. Here as we sit 10 days in front of Christmas, Met fans have every right to feel betrayed, have every right to feel like they've been fed a false bill of goods, and have every right to feel like there's coal in their stockings. And if we get to opening day and that ballpark is half filled because the Mets haven't made any big moves, whether it be signing a Michael King, making upgrades to that rotation, maybe trying to steal Bellinger from the Yankees or any other team that could be pursuing them. It could be a long, ugly, quiet year at Citi Field. And Steve Cohen will have no one but himself to blame for providing this fan base with false hope and trusting David Sterns, who still manages this place like it's a small market ball club. I gotta take my first break of the podcast, but I got a lot I want to talk about today. To turn the page toward the NFL coming up, because a lot going on here when it comes to these playoff scenarios. Something that I think a lot of us long wished for happened yesterday, and in a good way, but then also there's a negative attached to it, as well as a team that the opportunity has never been better for them, as well as, does anybody want to win the NFC? So I'll get to all of that over the next about 45 minutes or so here. Glad you guys could join me this evening. And as I tell you, each and every single Monday, please sit back, relax, help put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
Yesterday was a moment that, had you told me this were to happen in the preseason, I would have thought you were crazy. I would have thought there's no way in hell this is going to happen. But we are going to finally get, for the first time during the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes era, an NFL postseason that does not include the Kansas City Chiefs. This has become a common phrase used in life, ladies and gentlemen, but two things are allowed to be true. You can sit here and celebrate and enjoy the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are not going to be part of the postseason, because they've been kind of obnoxious to deal with. They've become that team that is almost totally protected by the league, and they almost always get the benefit of the call from referees, at least prior to this season. And while you can be happy about them not being in the playoffs, what you cannot do is celebrate what happened in the fourth quarter of yesterday's game. Yes, he can be a bit annoying with his Kermit the Frog-like voice. Yes, he is overprotected by officials to the point where if you breathe on him the wrong way, you're almost certainly going to get a fine in the mail from the NFL and potentially a one-game suspension. But there's no denying the fact that Patrick Mahomes is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever lace up the cleats. There's no denying how incredible a talent he is and what he has led the Kansas City Chiefs to doing over these last 7 years since he took over as their starting quarterback. His seasons prior to this year have ended with nothing less than an appearance in the AFC Championship game. 5 of those 7 years they've gone to the Super Bowl, and on 3 occasions they have won on Super Bowl Sunday. He has such an incredible resume up until this point, where if he never played another snap, he could waltz right into Canton. He would be immediately an NFL Hall of Famer. But to sit there for any fans, and I think it's just a small amount of Chief haters out there that do this. I don't think the overwhelming majority of us took any joy, any glee, any celebration in the fact that Patrick Mahomes had to be helped off the field yesterday near the end of the fourth quarter in what we would later find out, and I first guessed at the time, was a torn ACL in his left knee, something that he's been dealing with for quite some time. Yes, he's made more money than most of us have ever seen. And like I said, he'll be a Hall of Famer someday just based on what he has done already in his career. But whether you're the star quarterback of the team, whether you're the 53rd guy that is just playing some garbage minutes and barely plays over the course of a 17-game season, these guys' careers are such a short portion of their life. And I will never take joy, never take any celebratory glee in someone getting hurt and it knocking them out for the rest of the year. Plus, even with them being out of playoff contention, not being able to tune in on any Sunday or on Christmas Day when they were set to play the Broncos, seeing a Chiefs game and not having Patrick Mahomes there immediately takes my interest away from that game. Because even with them out of playoff contention, you know that there's still the threat, still the possibility of them pulling out the win, still creating some version of intrigue. Now there's no intrigue. Now there's nothing where you look at the Kansas City Chiefs and say, there's not anything appetizing about this team. Because you're going to have the classic backup quarterback that is Gardner Minshew playing these last 3 games for them. In all likelihood, they're probably going to lose all 3 of these games. I doubt Travis Kelce and Chris Jones are going to really give it their all and show any true interest over these last 3 weeks. It's going to get to the point where Andy Reid is dragging these guys out onto the field, kicking and screaming every Sunday or Thursday, whenever they happen to play. It is an awful situation for the NFL. At least it didn't happen, say, with them clinching a playoff spot. At least this is happening in a down year for them. And you hope for his sake, you hope for the league's sake, that he's back ready to go in week 1 next year. But this allows the Kansas City Chiefs to do what I've said for a while now that they need to do. Look in the mirror and hit the reset button. Because they've gotten away with preying on the ineptitude of some of their competition in the AFC. They've gotten away with what a weakness that offensive line has been for a couple of years now. And it has essentially been a cakewalk through the AFC. But now they're not going to be there. They're not going to be part of January. And that creates an opportunity. That creates an amazing spot for one team that they, quite frankly, have never seen before that they need to take advantage of right now. Because the AFC has never been at its weakest. You think about this postseason. There's not going to be any Patrick Mahomes. There's not going to be Joe Burrow. You may or may not have Lamar Jackson, depending on what goes down in the AFC North. Justin Herbert is not a regular of January and has not had the greatest of January luck, but he has a much better head coach to go into the big dance with. And we need to see it to believe it, even despite them being 12-2 from Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos. But the Buffalo Bills have never been provided with an opportunity like this. Yes, they still currently sit in a wild card spot. Yes, they are still one game behind the New England Patriots. But they're going to be in January. They're going to be in the postseason. And now the roadblock is not there. That one guy that has prevented them from Super Bowl Sunday, Patrick Mahomes, that one team, the Kansas City Chiefs, that has prevented them from Super Bowl Sunday, is not standing in their way right now. Yes, the Patriots have come of age and have a new mindset, new philosophy with their new head coach, Mike Vrabel. But the Patriots could end up kicking themselves here for the fact that they left the door open, gave just the slightest inch for Buffalo to walk right through, because they had them. They had them dead on rights yesterday. Up 21-0 in the first half, up 24-7 at halftime. This looked like it was going to be a coronation for the New England Patriots, winning the AFC East for the first time since Tom Brady was walking the halls there for them. But then the second half happened, and their offense completely disappeared. They could not run the ball to save their life. Other than that one long run by Travion Henderson, they had no offense to speak of, and the Bills had their way with them. Were marching down the field relentlessly. Every time the Patriots scored, they had a counterpunch to it. They were getting the big stops and able to shut the Patriots down when necessary. They finally got their ground game going with James Cook. And just at the moment where you needed Drake May to make a big play, he gets picked off to end this game. And now that rather than having a final 3 weeks of the season where they can think about potentially the 1 seed and worrying about getting some players healthy, now they potentially can be in a dogfight going down the stretch when it comes to this division. Because whereas the Bills get to play the Cleveland Browns next week, albeit in the dog pound down there in Cleveland, they got to go down to Baltimore and play the Ravens. Even with Lamar Jackson looking a slightly less version of himself. Before both of these teams will get the Jets in the final 2 weeks of the season, and that's surrounded by the Bills getting the Eagles in week 17 and the Patriots getting the Dolphins in week 18. You like it where your only concern is the 1 seed, but now you've created something where you've got to fight till the very end to even just get a home playoff game. And that's not something that you were hoping for if you're a Patriot fan. Because even though Josh Allen is dealing with a lack of a true number 1 wide receiver, even though every week he seemingly has to put on his Superman cape to save the Buffalo Bills' life, that is not the guy you want to be tempting fate with. Because even in the slightest bit of adversity, he comes through. Unless it's against the Kansas City Chiefs, he has been proven and tested in every situation that there is. And there's never been a greater opportunity for him than this year to finally have that moment and finally get to Super Bowl Sunday. Now, the one thing I did not expect to be saying this year, the one thing I did not have on my 2025/2026 NFL season bingo card was the name Phillip Rivers. You know, if I was going to be talking about Phillip Rivers this year, I figured that it was going to be congratulating him getting into Canton, Ohio as a Hall of Famer, as he was announced last month as a semifinalist for the Hall of Fame. I did not expect us to be talking about him coming out and starting games for the Indianapolis Colts on Sundays, but that's the situation we're now in. I thought it was a joke. I was laughing my ass off. I thought Adam Schefter was trying to pull one over on us last Monday night on Countdown leading up to Monday Night Football when he said that the Colts were bringing in Phillip Rivers for a workout on Tuesday morning. But lo and behold, here he is rolling out there at 44 years young with 10 kids, now a grandfather. And he's going out trying to get the Colts to the postseason. And I've got to admit, even though I thought it was going to be a disaster, even though I thought there was the potential for him being carted off the field, he didn't embarrass himself. Yeah, he threw the pick at the end of the game, but what do you expect? He's, at that point, just trying to get his team back in field goal position. For a guy that had gone 1,800 days without throwing the football, not bad. And some of his contemporaries from that era are probably saying, hey, if he can do it, why can't I do it? Somewhere right now, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, hell, even Tom Brady, they've all got smirks on their face saying, don't tempt me. Don't give me an offer. Now, Tom can't do it because he's a part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. But this is absolute craziness that the Colts had to stoop to this, had to go the Phillip Rivers route with all of the injuries that they have at the quarterback position, with losing Daniel Jones for the season, being without the backup Riley Leonard, still having the orbital issue for Anthony Richardson and not being able to trust him. And while he looked good, he looked okay, I don't expect this to be, one of those situations where you drag the aging gunslinger out of retirement and he still has it. I don't expect this to be an us against the world scenario and them to still come crawling into the postseason, because that's what it is at this point. After them being one of the best stories in the league for the first 2 months of the season, when you combine the injuries to Daniel Jones, Sauce Gardner, and DeForest Buckner, they've hit hard times. They haven't won a game in a month. They've gone from 8-2 to now 8-6 after losing 4 straight. And offensively, there's a lot to be desired from this team. They went up against the Seahawks team yesterday that played very conservative against them. And they couldn't take advantage of the fact that the Seahawks can't run the football to save their damn life. Plus, the schedule just gets so much more difficult from here. And yeah, the Texans and the Jaguars still have a difficult route going into the postseason. The Jaguars have got to play 2 road games against the Broncos coming up, and before going to Indianapolis in Week 17. And then they get potentially a patsy game in Week 18 playing the Titans back at home. The Texans have a gimme against the Raiders, who, if there was ever a team that's tanking, it's them, before playing the Chargers and then finishing up against the Colts. Whereas the Colts, they've got 3 difficult games in a row. Home for Monday Night Football against the 49ers next week, who are somehow quietly doing things smoke and mirrors even without their best 2 defensive players. Then the Jaguars, who have been lighting up the radar against everyone for the last month, put up 48 on my Jets yesterday afternoon, scoring on 8 of their first 9 possessions of the game. And then they got the Texans in Houston. So this is not going to be an easy task for them. The story you love, the story you want to root for when it comes to Phillip Rivers. Me, selfishly, I'm rooting against it because the Jets have the Colts' first round draft pick. But just overall, not just in sports, but in life in general, how do you not find this story inspiring? A guy that's a potential future Hall of Famer, willing to reset all of that, willing to say, you know what, I'm going to take a chance on myself after not playing for 5 years and willingly go out there when I could embarrass myself. And instead, he goes out there and puts up a pretty solid performance and gave his team a chance to win at the end. Unfortunately, they ran into one of the more clutch kickers in the league in Jason Myers, and he was able to outkick the Indianapolis Colts. But such a great story, but I don't think this is going to be a happy Hollywood ending.
I'll be back.
It's time to ask a serious question. It's time to be real about things here. Do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers actually want to make the postseason? I'm being dead on serious here. And I'm not saying this because I was wrong about my hopes and expectations for them in early October, where I thought they could be potentially a Super Bowl team, a sneaky team to get by all of the wars going on in the NFC, whether it be in the North, where you got a collision between the Packers and the Bears, or a three-team dogfight out west between the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers, or even with what you've seen with the struggles of the Eagles offensively and how they're going to win the division by default now due to Dallas losing to Minnesota on Sunday Night Football and being all but eliminated from postseason contention. The Buccaneers had a clear path to everything. They had it right there in front of them. No true challengers in the NFC South. Seemingly everything going their way until injuries started to kick in. Losing Mike Evans for almost 2 months. Didn't have Chris Godwin back until around Thanksgiving time. Teams started to focus more in Boca, and he didn't have as strong the last couple months as his start of the season was, because he early on looked like he was going to run away with the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. And now the last 2 weeks, they have gone out there and crapped all over themselves. It's bad enough that they lost to a New Orleans Saints team that has no talent whatsoever. But then you have less than a week later a chance to rebound from that. You're going up at home against the Atlanta Falcons, a team that had already been eliminated from playoff contention, with a quarterback in Kirk Cousins that a lot of people in their mind had already considered retired. Yes, they have some good, young, impressive offensive talent in the likes of Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, but they had nothing to play for. They had no true motivation other than to make your life a living hell. You had a 28-14 lead in the fourth quarter at home on Thursday night. Every opportunity for them to give up. And you let them march down the field 3 times on their last drives to come back and win that game, including with a game-winning field goal by Zane Gonzalez at 0-0 to end that game. Unfreaking forgivable if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. Any Buck fan right now has every right to be as pissed as the profanity-laced tirade that Todd Bowles had after the game, have a right to be pissed at this defense, have a right to be pissed at this team in general. It was right there in front of them. And especially with the gift that you were later given on Sunday afternoon, a gift that you truly didn't deserve, with the Panthers crapping on themselves against the Saints, committing penalties from here to eternity, including a roughing the passer on Tyler Schultz at the end of the game that made the game-winning field goal seemingly a chip shot. We should be sitting here right now talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the outside looking in when it comes to playoff contention. But they got bailed out big time by the New Orleans Saints, a team they couldn't even beat back in Week 14. Their one saving grace for them, actually two. A, they've got Mike Evans back and healthy, and he looked like a stud on Thursday night. Looked like he hadn't even missed a beat. And now coming off of a little bit of a respite and a week of practice, who knows how good he'll look this Sunday. But also, twice in these final 3 games of the season, you will get to play the Carolina Panthers. And whereas in between those matchups, Carolina has got to play the Seahawks, you get the Miami Dolphins. Albeit the Miami Dolphins are still in playoff contention, have played well in the last month to possibly save Mike McDaniel's job and maybe sneak in as a wild card in the AFC. And who would have thought that we'd be sitting here on December 15th and talking about the Dolphins being alive and the Chiefs being eliminated, but that's neither here or there. The Buccaneers, now that they really don't deserve to be in the playoffs right now with the way they've played recently, but because of how much of a meh the NFC South is and how Carolina, even despite playing well over the last 2 months, let one go against the 4-10 Saints on Sunday afternoon, the Buccaneers really need to get their heads on straight. Otherwise, they're going to be sitting at home watching the playoffs in January, just like you and I will be. And when it comes to January, let's be honest with ourselves here. Is there anyone you trust in the NFC? Is there anyone that you look at and say right now that they're clearly, definitively better than everybody else? Yes, the Eagles won 31-0 yesterday. They're playing the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are trying to get the first overall pick in the draft. They were playing Kenny Pickett at quarterback. Let that set in for a second there. They had 75 yards of offense against the Eagles. We know the Eagles are a good defensive team, but that was a glorified scrimmage. So they, to me, are the bottom team when it comes potentially for that 1 seed in the NFC. But you look at the other 5 possible contenders. The Rams, Seahawks, Bears, 49ers, and Packers. Each of them have their warts that you're very concerned about. Especially now if you're a Green Bay Packer fan. After not just blowing a second half lead against the Broncos yesterday and giving them second life with some of these kill shots that Jordan Love was trying to create and getting picked off deep twice. But the injuries on this team are starting to pile up. You'd already lost Tucker Kraft. You're missing members of it, both sides of your offensive and defensive line. But you lost probably the most important member of that defensive line yesterday when in the third quarter, Micah Parsons took a wrong step and now he's down for the year with a torn left ACL. That was your big get. That was the move where people said, oh, this puts them not just in Super Bowl contention, but makes them a favorite coming out of the NFC. Remember when early on they got off to that 2-0 start? And at times with the way Jordan Love has played recently, people saying this is a team that could be a legitimate Super Bowl threat. You get that 1 seed, everything could come out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. I can't see that happening anymore. Especially if Watson's going to be gone for a couple of weeks, and now you're without your best defensive player, your best pass rusher, a guy that was leading the league in pressures, 3rd in the league in sacks, and was just a man on the mission at times this season. Yes, he got paid, but he wants to get that ring. He wants to get what he was never able to accomplish in Dallas and had a better chance of accomplishing in Green Bay. And now that's not going to happen anymore. I mean, I still think they'll make the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to win that division. They got to go up against the Bears on Saturday in Chicago. And now they're reeling after losing to the Broncos, losing their best player. The Bears just came off of kicking the Browns' ass yesterday. And Ben Johnson has Caleb Williams believing in himself like most prognosticators had been believing in Caleb when he was coming out of college. Right now, if you're looking at the NFC North, I don't know if there's one team you could truly put your finger on and have a belief in their pulse, because the Bears have not been there yet with this quarterback and this head coach. And the Packers are dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. And I don't think there's one team in the NFC West that you can truly say they are definitively better than the rest. They are truly and definitively the favorite to win it all. When it comes to the fact that the Rams, yes, still hold the tiebreaker, but now they're going to play the Seahawks on Thursday night. And although the Seahawks can't run the football to save their life and have been able to survive the fact that Sam Darnold has taken some steps back lately and has been very fortunate not to cost them games, the Los Angeles Rams were dealt a blow yesterday, as they may not have Davante Adams for the rest of this regular season. It may not be important for any other team more so than the Rams to get that first overall spot in the NFC postseason. Because remember, the 1 seed is the only team that gets a bye in the playoffs. Everybody else, it's 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, and then the 1 seed comes back into play in the second round, where they only have to win 3 games to be a champion, rather than the wild cards and other 3 division winners have to win 4 games to be Super Bowl champions. Now, without Davante Adams, due to this hamstring issue for the next couple of weeks, with the fact that Puka Nacua has battled some injuries during the course of this season, and you're going up against a Seahawks defense that is no joke, this could put the Rams in a precarious situation for not just the 1 seed, but also that division, because we keep talking about both Seattle and the Rams, but we're forgetting about the 49ers. The 49ers, who have dealt with more injuries than anybody in the league so far this season. They were without Brock Purdy for over a month, without George Kittle for over a month, without their best 2 players on defense, and still they keep just rolling along. They were without Ricky Pearsall earlier in the season. There's been very few games this year, if any, maybe week 1 being the exception, where they had everybody healthy, ready to go. And still, Kyle Shanahan has this team in not just a position where they can make the postseason, but they can sit back and wait and see what the results are between the Rams and Seattle. They can watch these 2 teams go out there and kill each other on Thursday night, realizing that they have a potential sitting duck waiting for them in Phillip Rivers on Monday night, and the Indianapolis Colts, who can't get out of their own way. I'm not going to crown anyone as a favorite here. I learned my lesson on this about 3 weeks ago. Every single time I'm ready, whether it be AFC with the Bills, NFC with the Rams or the Eagles, every time I'm ready to definitively back somebody and make an argument for someone as being the favorite, it comes back and shoots me right in the face. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to sit back and enjoy it. I'm going to sit back and love the fact that we got a postseason where there is no true favorite. There's not that alpha dog. There's not the Kansas City Chiefs where anyone who's not a Chief fan is rooting for the other 13 teams in the postseason to win the Super Bowl and stop a Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift celebration on the field. We have a playoffs where you have no idea what's going to happen, and still so much up for grabs over these final 3 weeks of the season. And that kind of parity, quality parity in my opinion, is something that every sports league and every fan subconsciously should root for.
I'll be back.
As we await to see what happens on Monday Night Football tonight between the Steelers and the Dolphins, that will have an impact on the AFC playoffs one way or another, whether it be the Dolphins and their late pursuit of a wild card spot, or with the Steelers when it comes to the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens at least held up their end of the bargain yesterday, going out there and taking care of business against the Cincinnati Bengals. But that's not the story coming out of this game. The real story, besides the fact that Lamar Jackson still looks a step behind the Lamar Jackson we expect him to be, mostly because of his early season injuries. The real story is how disinterested and disheartening the performance was from the Cincinnati Bengals. They look like a team that didn't even want to be out there. Other than Jamar Chase, no one showed up. No one looked ready to compete. And I believe a lot of that is based on the comments of Joe Burrow last Wednesday, when he talked about how he didn't view playing football as fun before he suffered his turf toe injury in week 2. That he was lacking a lot of motivation, saying that he's not in this for the money, even though every athlete says that, but let's face it, with the amount of dough they're paid, of course they're in it for the money. But he said, quote, "If I want to keep doing this, I have to have fun doing it." And it's led to a lot of speculation. It's led to a lot of thought about Joe Burrow's future there, because he's got to be fed up with what he's seen there. We've seen a bunch of times where the Bengals could have won games even with Joe Burrow out of the lineup, but that defense let the game up in the end, whether it be blowing a big lead in the fourth quarter against my New York Jets, or seemingly coming back from a 2-score lead late against the Chicago Bears, only to give up a touchdown in the final 45 seconds of the game, in which they let Cole Kmet go 50-plus yards down the field wide open. So they've blown chances to at least remain competitive without Joe Burrow. And he's probably sick of it. He sees that defense. He sees how they've put together a piss-poor offensive line that is getting him killed, getting other quarterbacks on the team killed, and he doesn't want to continue to deal with this. He doesn't want to have the career that Andrew Luck had, where he had to abruptly retire at age 29, the same age that Burrow just turned, because the injuries and the rehab became such a pain for him, such a joy stealer for him, that he retired before the 2019 season. Or he remembers the past of Carson Palmer and how he dealt with a lot of crap there for his first 7 years, but finally forcing his way off of that team in 2011. Or in the latest example of how the Bengals are cheap, the fact they don't even shovel out the stadium for their fans, and the fans had to sit on snow yesterday against the Baltimore Ravens. And all together, this is just a horrible situation that he wants no part of, because like I mentioned before, these players get one career. They want to make the most out of that career. And at 29 years young, Joe Burrow still potentially has a lot more football left in him if he does indeed intend to keep playing football, if he does indeed intend to keep going at this thing. but it's not going to end in a positive, happy way with the Cincinnati Bengals. And you wonder if going into this offseason, even despite the great offensive talent he has around him, the fact he has no offensive line and that defense is garbage, he's got a cheap-ass owner, is he going to finally force his way out of there after what has been 6 very tumultuous seasons? When you take into account, yeah, he's had a lot of success during that time. They've won the division twice. They got to the Super Bowl, but lost a couple of years ago to the Rams. He's been a Pro Bowler twice, won the Comeback Player of the Year in 21 and 24, but I'm sure he doesn't want to continue to be the Comeback Player of the Year. He doesn't want to keep dealing with these injuries that seem only to happen because he has no offensive line in front of him. Now, if you're the Bengals, first off, their ownership is amongst the worst in the NFL. It's a bottom 5 ownership in the NFL, probably a bottom 5 ownership in all of sports, with the way they treat their fans, treat their players, and treat their alumni. And you'd have to be an absolute fool to trade a player like Joe Burrow, who probably comes along for a franchise once every 20 years, and they'd spend decades trying to replace him. He's probably the best quarterback that they've ever had, with all due respect to Boomer Esiason, Carson Palmer, and Andy Dalton. But with the fact that this guy has a 5-year contract remaining, a full no-trade clause, he could force the issue. He could really make things even more miserable, even more painful, especially if they fire their head coach after this season and force his way out of there. Now, of course, the question has come up in recent days when it comes to my team, the New York Jets. The New York Jets, who are loaded with draft capital over these next 2 seasons, have put themselves in a position where they could get involved in almost any trade that happens in the league right now for a quarterback and outbid anybody. With the fact they have 2 first-round picks this year, 2 second-round picks this year, a bevy of first-round picks next year, as they're going to have 3 first-rounders with theirs, the Colts, and the Cowboys, on top of their second-round pick as well. So they are well-stocked if a big-time quarterback becomes available. And far be it from me to deny the idea of going and getting Joe Burrow. He would be probably the best quarterback that they've ever had. But you have to ask yourself, do you really want to keep going down this road where you trade for somebody else's quarterback? Yes, in the case of Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, you got them at the back end of their careers when they were around 40 years old. And it didn't end well in either one of those situations. But there's no guarantee in happiness in what you could potentially get in the draft. You know what Joe Burrow is. But why would he want to come to the New York Jets? They have less offensive talent than he currently has. Garrett Wilson is really, really good, but I don't think he's Jamar Chase. He might be slightly better than T. Higgins, but even that slightly is questionable. And he would deal with an owner in Woody Johnson that is just as bad as the ownership that he is currently dealing with. Although Woody will pay players and not be as much of a cheap bastard, he just meddles way too much. But if you're Burrow, beyond just the Jets, the teams that you could be potentially looking at least in my opinion, are the following 5. The Las Vegas Raiders, who currently sit at the 2nd overall pick in the NFL draft, could potentially get the 1st overall pick, depending on what happens going down the stretch with both them and the New York Giants. The Giants currently sitting at 1 overall, and maybe the Raiders don't like Fernando Mendoza, or not a Dante Moore or a Ty Simpson fan, and don't want to go and get a real proven quarterback. And Joe Burrow would fit that bill. having Geno Smith that you just signed does not block you from getting someone as great as Joe Burrow. Or you got the Arizona Cardinals, who are in all likelihood going to divorce themselves from Kyler Murray this coming off season. The Falcons, they've got almost as much offensive firepower as do the Bengals, have a better defense, and are dealing with a quarterback conundrum themselves, but could get out of the Kirk Cousins contract this offseason, and Michael Penix is dealing with another injury concern. Then you got the LA Rams. The LA Rams, who are an interesting one here because, remember, Matthew Stafford had back problems, spine issues during the preseason. And at his age, there's no telling when that could crop up again. He's probably gotten that thing good enough to play, but that, I think, is going to be an issue that continues to pop up. And with Sean McVay there, he's not going to want to deal with putting a rookie quarterback in with this talent if Stafford retires after this year, because he's got a team surrounding it ready to win. And what better way to potentially succeed Stafford than go get a top-line quarterback that's more than 10 years younger or close to 10 years younger in Joe Burrow. And finally, you got to include the Minnesota Vikings in here. Because even though he went out there and won last night in Dallas, J.J. McCarthy has greatly struggled this year in what is essentially his rookie season. Kevin O'Connell has a generational talent at wide receiver in Justin Jefferson, who is not happy right now, is not enjoying life, seems to be as miserable playing football as Joe Burrow is in Cincinnati. So even though the Jets could outbid most of those teams, Joe Burrow has a no-trade clause. Why would he want to come to the Jets? Even though it's a move that in all likelihood the Jets probably should make because they have the draft capital to do so, they're still lacking a lot of holes on defense, as shown yesterday when they got torched by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Still need to find a true number 2 wide receiver to go along with Garrett Wilson. And there is no definitive answer on whether Breece Hall is going to be here beyond this season. So while on paper, Jet fans can fantasize about the idea of Joe Burrow all they want. But to me, it is just a fantasy. And the Jets need to be concerning themselves with reality. That reality is you need to get yourself your franchise quarterback. Whether that is trading for Joe Burrow or whether that is drafting one over the next 2 years, it is of the utmost importance to get that position correct, because you are not going to go anywhere in this league without having a true franchise quarterback, something that the Jets have not had in a long, long time. Could that answer be Burrow? I'd love it, but I severely doubt that's the route that's going to happen for the Jets going into next season. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, December 15th, 2025. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. Remember, folks, you got one life, so you might as well try to live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time, next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody. I have had enough of you. Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to smell you. Now leave.
I'll be back.